My name is Mike Fessinger, and welcome to a special episode of the Zero Check Podcast. Normally, we're an actual play podcast running Paizo's Kingmaker adventure path, but today I'm thrilled and honored to share with you our interview with Paizo Org Play Coordinator Alex Speidel, who also happens to be one of the union stewards and negotiators for United Paizo Workers. A few weeks ago, Alex, Donnie, and I sat down for a chat where Alex provided us with an inside perspective of Paizo's Org Play program, as well as its state of union affairs. You know, in getting to know Alex, it was immediately obvious to us that this guy is driven and he's passionate about Paizo, Pathfinder, Starfinder, and his role within the company. So naturally, we had a ton in common. It was so cool of him to take time out of his day and chill out with us for a bit, and we're excited to share our conversation with you now. So without anything further, please sit back and enjoy. Welcome, Alex. How you doing, man? Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I'm doing very well. It's been quite a busy week here at Paizo. We've got a bunch of travel coming up that I'm excited for, but excited to be here.
Well, great. Well, thank you. Now, what did you think when a random guy sent you a direct message on Discord to say, "Hey, I've got a podcast. Do you want to be on it?"
At this point, that's par for the course in my life, to be quite honest with you, which is extremely strange on a number of different fronts.
You and I live differently, I feel like. I guess
I think that might be true.
You live in a world where people come to you with things. Donnie and I live in a world where it's like, we're like, is anybody out there? Hello?
We're begging people to listen. People are begging you to talk. Yeah. It's just different sides of the same coin.
It's very strange. I am, I guess, a big fish in a smallish pond. It's very strange when I go to conventions and things like that to be recognized by people who I've never met. They'll come up and say, "Oh, hi, it's so good to see you. I'm so glad you're here." And it takes me a minute to place their face because I've only seen their Discord avatar, right? Or I only know them through a screen. And it's like, oh, that's what you look like in person. That's how tall you are.
Well, and it's funny because this is not the first time that you and I have talked. When I sent you, as you saw in the chat history, yes. I have been in last year in 2023. I was a Gen Con volunteer. I ran some games in the Sagamore ballroom and stuff, and I was like, oh, okay, I'm going to reach out to this Alex person. And then I hop onto the Discord and I go, oh, I've talked to him before because I had lame questions for him about volunteering. In fact, let's roll back the tape here. I'm going to look at it. Let's go through what I had to say to you.
I hope I was helpful and patient because sometimes I'm not.
Well, I think you were. Okay, here we go. So first of all, note the conciliatory tone that I have in this message. Hello. Sorry, I'm a bit confused, period. This is what I state to you. I'm volunteering for 20 hours. Again, not a lot of context for you, Alex. I don't get a free badge for just 20 hours, right? Question mark. And then you say, 3 blocks gets you a badge. Yup. And I go, oh, I wasn't aware, period. Sorry, my first time volunteering. Okay, so I want to pause now and ask you, do you get a lot of messages like this, or am I unique?
No, I absolutely get these sorts of messages all the time in the lead up to convention season. People with questions just like this. It's everyone's first time at some point, right? Yeah. It was my first time 5-6 years ago, so I don't mind it. I get them all the time. Honestly, those are the easiest questions for me to answer. It's, yep, here you go. Here's the thing.
Well, and I will note here that I messaged you first at 1:06 p.m. You got back to me in 3 minutes.
Oh, that's slow for me.
Oh, whoa, guys, I was fast in my world. Sometimes I'll I won't respond to an email for a day or two, Donnie, what's your longest you've gone without responding to a work email?
Oh, my goodness. That is extreme guilt. I had to be on vacation for that to happen. My personal email, though, not that way. I don't know why it is.
I live on the edge, maybe.
You're a rebel, man.
I've been interested in org play. It's always one of those things where it's like, oh, man, I should get like a Wichita Lodge going. Mm-hmm. We even emailed back and forth with the guy, and he's like, you could be a venture captain. And I love titles. So
it is nice. It is nice. Right?
I love a good title. And so I wanted to do that. But, for me and Donnie and for our listeners, I think the thing that most people probably think about when they hear that someone has gotten the job as the organized play coordinator for Paizo can you take us through the path that you took to get there? Was it your education, or do you have a unique set of skills, or was it something else?
I wish I had an answer to that, because I think I said this to you earlier, but I kind of fell into it backwards. I was a venture agent, which is kind of our store level coordinator for Pathfinder or Starfinder Society. I was a venture agent for about 6 months, 8 months, something like that. I went to Origins in 2019. That was my first really big convention. Ran a lot of games there, had a lot of fun, came out of that and said, hey, how do I get more involved with this? How do I run games? And so after that, I started organizing games at a local game store. I did that for a few months. And then it was just, at the time, I was looking for a new job. The job that I was in, I was working part-time in video production, and it was fine, but I was looking for something else. And I just saw that they were looking for an organized play associate, not even a coordinator, just an associate. And the idea was
that would report to the coordinator.
Yes, reported to the organized play coordinator at the time. And the job was listed very much as a lot of data entry, a lot of responding to emails and things like that. Just a lot of this kind of, I don't want to say grunt work, because I think that demeans it, but that kind of clerical
admin,
stuff, the kind of stuff that makes
overhead.
Yeah, administrative kind of work. And I looked at that and I said, that's something I can do. I'm really good with spreadsheets. I'm really on top of my email inbox. No one look at my email inbox right now. It's fine. But I'm a very organized person. I think that this is something I could do. I've got, passion for the program and all of these things. And I was also in a position where I was just like, I'm going to apply so that they can say no, right? Because if I don't apply, then I'll never get it. But if I do apply, then I did everything I could possibly do.
Now, did you happen to be local to the company, or
not at all?
You
not at all. I was in Ohio at the time.
So were you in a life state where you're I could move tomorrow kind of thing? Or?
Kind of, yeah. And that's sort of what ended up happening. Spoilers, but I was not fresh out of college. I was a few years out of college, but my husband had just graduated within the past year or two. And so we were, sort of starting to put down roots. He wasn't my husband yet at the time, but we were still very much in a transitory state. And like I say, I was looking for something new. So I just threw an application into the wind, sent in a nice cover letter. I remember specifically that for the job, I also had to take a typing test and send in my words per minute.
Wow.
I do not remember what my words per minute were, but I distinctly remember having to do that as well. Man. So I sent that in, and then a week or two later, I get an email saying, hey, we'd like to set up a call with you. And I said, okay, great.
Wow.
The other part of this story, of course, is that, as you mentioned, I wasn't local. I lived in Ohio at the time. Paizo's headquarters were and still kind of are in Seattle. And at the time, the job required you to be in Seattle. I had applied for the job without actually talking to my fiance at the time.
Nice.
Because I figured this is a long shot. I'll never get it.
Yeah.
And so I had to have a conversation with him after I got that email to say, so I applied for a job and they want to interview me. Also, the job is across the country. How do you feel about that?
Yeah.
Don't recommend that. Talk to your partner before you apply for a job across the country. Just pro tip to anyone out there.
We have to own our mistakes from time. What better place to do that than on the internet?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it worked out all right. It's worked out well for both of us. But it was definitely a case of, we talked about maybe we'd move somewhere someday, but definitely not to the West Coast, to the Pacific Northwest. So that was an interesting. But yeah, I went through the interviews. And then I was offered the job in February of 2020, which was an extremely normal time to start a new job, as you can imagine.
Yeah, nothing. Yeah,
sure.
I mean, there was maybe some headlines like maybe something's coming, but
I remember reading some of those headlines in the airport on my way here, just thinking I wonder if that's something I should start paying attention to. Probably nothing. But yeah, eventually we moved out to the Seattle area. I came out alone first, and then eventually my partner and I came out together. And now here we are, and it's been, I just passed my 4-year mark, like I say, back in February. So,
well, congratulations. I mean, it's what a cool thing.
It's very cool. It's wild. Yeah.
Example of kind of this spur of the moment decision, sort of changing the course of your life. And
in so many ways.
Yeah. You kind of get thrown in and, become almost this pseudo public figure in a very niche area. And I can't imagine what that's like. Was the process competitive? Do you know whether it was?
I really don't know. I never really talked to the folks who hired me afterwards. I know that like there were a lot of people with a lot of experience with the program that had applied. And I think ultimately what it came down to, what I do know is that they were looking at me compared to other candidates, and they were like, well, Alex has the skills. He doesn't have as much experience with the program. These other people have a lot of experience with the program and passion for it, but they might not necessarily have all the skills we're looking for. We can sort of indoctrinate him into what we need him to do for the program. Ultimately, if we have someone who can hit the ground running, that's probably better for us. So I think that might have been what tipped it in my favor. But yeah, it was just, like I say, something I never expected to happen, and now here we are.
Here you are. Now you're hanging out with me and Donnie on the Zero Chat podcast. Was it Pathfinder organized play that you were running on your own beforehand, or was it a different?
I actually came in through Starfinder. I found Starfinder right after its release. Someone brought the book back from Gen Con when it was released in, I think, 2017. Yeah. Brought it back to my local board game cafe, and I happened to be looking for something to get out and do on a weekend, so I went and tried it out, and I really fell in love with it. I had played a little bit of, Dungeons and Dragons, other kind of stuff beforehand, of course, but Starfinder, I'm a sci-fi fan more so than a fantasy fan. So like it just really it captured me, and it was just a really cool and really very hopeful universe to live in. A lot of the science fiction, like a lot of the science fiction games that I had encountered before always felt very grim, dark. You've got your cyberpunks and your shadow runs, darkened cities and rainy streets and things like that. And Starfinder just really felt like a breath of fresh air after that. And so I was hooked. I played a bunch of Starfinder, but yeah, that's how I came into it, was Starfinder. And then when I joined the company, I remember in my first few months, I spent a lot of time on the clock just reading Pathfinder books, reading old Pathfinder scenarios, just because this was a world I hadn't encountered as much. I bought the core rulebook like a PDF when it came out in 2019, just because I was like, I was aware of it. I was sort of in the universe, so I flipped through it a little bit. But it was really exciting to just kind of discover this new world that so many people were really passionate about, and see kind of the seeds that had led to Starfinder as well. It's like, oh, I get the reference of Absalom Station now. I get these references that are built in here. I understand Yatembe Park and all these things. So that's how I came into it.
Well, it's so interesting because we have origins with Starfinder as well. When we, this goes back to the pandemic a little bit. This was before Donnie came into our lives, but Bill and Chris and Brad and I were all hanging out. We didn't have much going on as most people didn't in those days. And we started doing 2 to 3 sessions of Starfinder a week. Wow. Just from our basements, we were doing what was that first 6-part module?
The Dead Suns?
We did 4 books of Dead Suns. And really got into it. And then I said, guys, there is now Pathfinder 2nd edition that's coming out. I think it was out by then. I said, we should really look at this. It's a 3-action economy. That's kind of cool,
Yeah, absolutely.
I think I'm into it, And they were like, but we've done 4 books. There's 2 more to go. Can't we just finish? And that campaign died, as so many do.
Yes.
And then we got into Pathfinder. Yeah. I don't know what foolishness caused us to begin recording our sessions, but that followed later.
There's a good chance that Starfinder 2E will, of course, derail the Pathfinder 2E campaign. I mean, let's be honest with ourselves. Very shiny object. It's gonna happen.
I totally understand. I'm so excited for it.
I will reach for all manner of shiny objects, and we're very committed to our Kingmaker campaign. We love it, but sometimes we look at each other and we go, Should we run a little Starfinder when it comes out? I don't know.
A little 7-level itch. It happens.
I know. Yes.
I like that. Yeah. Wouldn't it be nice to have some lasers just for a little bit, just to try it out again?
Yes. I'm totally with you.
Yeah. No, I have to say, as soon as I really started reading the Pathfinder content and really started understanding the system, like, I'm not saying the bloom came off the rose of Starfinder 1st edition, but I'm definitely very excited for 2nd edition. Very excited for the Pathfinder that I've gotten to play. It's just definitely really gripped me really quickly, and learning more about the world as well. Of course, it's just an excellent world to hang out in. I think it's a really intuitive and really fun system. So I'm super excited to put my 2 loves together. And launch Starfinder Second Edition at Gen Con. I can't wait.
So
my gosh, he's convinced me to play Starfinder 2 when it comes. He's done it.
One podcast at a time. That's my goal.
Right. Yeah. I agree that I loved the Starfinder 1 system because for me as a Pathfinder 1, that was my first. Well, really, I started with 3.5, like as a lot of people have,
of course. Yes.
and then went to Pathfinder 1 and loved it, and then loved how easy I flowed into Starfinder 1 from that. But with a lot of the just quality of life changes and the clarity that came with the Pathfinder 2 system, despite the fact that we will blow a rule at Donnie about once every 10 minutes, we blow a rule still probably.
Hey, that's all right.
Sometimes the same
Alex,
rule.
when you record and then people listen to it, you
tell me about it.
You get helpful corrections, and we love that. But I used to have.
I can assure you, it's so much worse as a Paizo employee. I have to tell anytime I run a table at a convention or anything, I tell everyone up front, they have not yet given me the chip in my brain that gives me every single rule at the touch of my, I'm going to make mistakes. I'm going to make up rules that don't exist. I'm going to ask you how your abilities work. Just bear with me. That's just how it works. As long as we're all on the same page and we're having a good time, that's what matters.
Yeah. I did some organized play, I think it must have been Gen Con online in 2021 or something. And I joined that set. I sign up and I don't know what I'm doing. Right. And I get there and I've slotted in an uncommon spell on my on my oracle.
Jail.
Yeah. And there was this, I can't remember his name, but he was this fantastic, GM. I mean, he was amazing, and his knowledge of the rules was, to me, seemed encyclopedic. So I cast, I don't know what I cast. I cast something on my oracle whose name is Aloysius, and
Oracle's best class.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. I agree. Thank you. And he goes, Aloysius. I'm like, yes. I can't do a British accent. He goes, Aloysius. I'm like, yeah. He's like, do you have a boon that allows you to have that spell? And I was like, well, I mean, which one, man? The one he's like, yeah, do you have a boon? I was like, no, I'm boonless, sir. I don't know what you're talking about. I thought he handled it really well, but I was like, I think I'll just take that off my sheet and put in, I guess I'll prepare another heal. I don't know. But that's what I love about it. I love the regulated nature, but you're talking to a lawyer right now. I love the regulated nature of all of this. I love that the module gets presented the same way to the same party every time.
Yep. That's the goal.
I just think it's fantastic.
People don't know the joy of rules lawyering with actual lawyers. It's a really good time.
Yeah, poor Donnie.
Never tried it.
Yeah. Donnie just finished out a Crown of the Cobalt King campaign that he ran, and not only was I a player, but another friend of mine who's also an attorney was a player, and and Donnie's not an attorney.
No.
But here he is. He's starting to run circles around us using precedent against us. And we have a need to be consistent with ourselves and everything. And it was really, really great. Alex, I was surprised that you double as a content writer as well. Can you
occasionally
talk about that? And I'm interested in this because as a lawyer, I'm never concerned about what the law should be. I'm very concerned about what it is and going through that. But when you write content, you're in a different position where you're thinking through what should the story be? What do I want it to be? And you might even have the opportunity in that context to create new items or even some rule changes, maybe.
So as you say, I've got my name on several Paizo products, which is incredible. There are several adventures for organized play that I've written. I think I have 2 Starfinder scenarios and a Pathfinder scenario and a bounty. And then I also have a very small credit on one of our hardcovers, Dark Archive, where I think I wrote about a total of 3 pages of that book. Nice. But it still gets you in the author list. So, hey, which is just, it's been wild, really. I feel very lucky, but I think I've really enjoyed the adventure writing more. Oh, I have some Starfinder hardcover credits too. Gosh, I have so many, I just forget them. But when I'm presented with sort of rule book credits, and it's especially like with Dark Archive, my assignment was literally just, you have a page, pitch me. And I was like, that's a lot of responsibility. That's a lot of That's a lot of something.
Wow.
And I consider myself a pretty good GM and an okay writer. I'm certainly not going to say that I'm terrible, but I'm not going to say that I'm by any means the best freelancer we have on our rolls. But like a blank page is just very stressful to me.
Yeah.
And so, but when you write outlines, especially, or when you write adventures for Paizo, you're presented with an outline and you sort of color. I don't want to say inside the lines because you can also go outside the lines if you have a cool idea, but it gives it a little bit more structure that I think is a little bit more helpful to me, because if you give me a structure, I can iterate on that and I can come up with cool ideas. And the outline isn't always very detailed. Sometimes it's just the players need to go here and they need to meet some fun NPCs and try and influence them. Tell me who those NPCs are. And then you get to iterate on that and you get to find some cool things. So it's not like you're just sort of being handed a template to Mad Lib in some words and then you're done. But I like it because it's still kind of a framework that I get to start with.
Will you visit with other freelancers to make sure you're not doubling up on concepts, or is everyone sort of so unique in their standpoints that doesn't really happen?
It depends on the project. Oftentimes for these big like rule books and things like that, they'll create Discord servers or things like that for the freelancers to collaborate so that they don't double up on those sorts of things. Or oftentimes to collaborate. Someone says, hey, I want to drop a hook here. And someone else says, oh, I could tie that to this other thing that I'm doing and create that through line. But the adventures, at least the organized play adventures that I've written, tend to be pretty solitary affairs. You're working with your developer, of course, but you're not really necessarily communicating with other authors unless sometimes, like if you're doing a 2-part adventure or it's part of an ongoing storyline, maybe you'll talk to someone who wrote a previous adventure, or you'll like get an author's turnover before it's really out in the wild yet, just so you can see where you've been set up so that you don't contradict anything that came before, or contrawise you can pay off the things that came before. So it really just depends on the project. Sometimes they're very collaborative, sometimes it's very solitary, and really the developers are the ones who guide that and know, oh, you're going to want to talk to this person. They're going to have useful stuff for you.
Well, and I think you answered kind of the next question that was on my mind, which is that, you know, when you look at these, and for those of you listening that haven't run these before, you'll have scenarios that are kind of designed as what you call like a bottle episode, like The Fly from Breaking Bad, right?
Some of them are, sure. Yeah.
But then you have some that are tagged with the meta plot, you know, a flair or whatever you want to call it. And my question was going to be, is there a kind of a cloistered team of people that are running the meta plot, and then it's maybe people that don't write as much, or freelancers that write the other ones? But it sounds like it can be hit or miss.
Yeah, it really just, I think the developers really get a sense, especially after they've worked with someone a few times, of the kind of adventure that an author is good at writing. We have authors we know that are really good at horror adventures, spooky stuff, or really good at, you know, a comedy, maybe sort of more lighthearted kind of adventures. We know there are authors who maybe represent like a particular background in their life that we want to be reflected. If we have an adventure set in Tian Sha, we might want to go to someone who has a background that's a little bit more relevant to that. So there are certainly some adventures that I think the developers consider kind of capstone adventures, are more important, that they'll make sure have more reliable authors, people with experience. Things like the introductions to our meta plots, maybe the conclusions or the high levels, we want those to go to people who we know what they're doing and we know what we're going to get out of them.
Sure.
But beyond that, it really just depends on the adventure and what you're going to be good at. I consider myself a fairly novice writer, and I've gotten to write some really kind of critical keystone adventures for our campaign, especially in Starfinder Society. And that was because I was familiar with the material. And I was able to work really closely with the developers kind of on work hours as well to sort of flesh out what we needed there. So it really just depends.
When I was running, I think it was that game with that encyclopedic GM, where I think it was the special for Starfinder in, I think it must have been 2021, possibly 2022, where we're running around and oh no, maybe I'm misremembering this. It might have been the Pathfinder special where if
you tell me what happened, I can tell you which special it was.
I was there when I was there when I was running. I think it must have been Pathfinder 2, but I was there when all of a sudden we encountered a pod with a Kasatha in there, but it was in the Pathfinder, timeline.
So we had a crossover special that launched in, when did 399 launch? Let's see. This year is 699. 3 is 5. So that would have been 2021. Yeah. The
Or
crossover
2021.
special was 21.
I was there. And I was just sort of like, I'm sitting there in this very unfinished basement. And I was sitting there and I was like, that's a freaking Kasatha there in the pod. And then I'm here with the pickup group, all these other dudes that are just sort of like, meh, you know, and
Doesn't mean anything to them.
Don't you understand? This is special. This is the
I need you to understand the implications of what we just found.
This is incredible. What are you guys doing? What is happening here? And I don't mean to downplay the impact, but I do think that there are people that want to show up and roll some dice and hang out,
Of
right?
course.
And
Yeah.
maybe, you know, and I come at this from like someone that played a lot of World of Warcraft during years where I really wish I'd been more productive, but that happens there too, where I'm sure
Right.
the developers have unveiled this amazing story moment, and I'm just like, cool, Sylvanas is burning down the tree, whatever, I don't care, you know. But I am fascinated by the meta plot and the wordplay thing, and I just wish that I had the time to really get into this.
Yeah.
And you know, maybe I'm Donnie, maybe I'm inspired. I think we got to start running this stuff in Wichita where we live.
Definitely.
Did you provide the voice for an NPC at one point? Did I
Yes,
have this
I
right?
did.
Okay, I'm going to take you into the moment from my perspective,
Okay.
and then you can share your perspective. So I'm down, you know, stress. It's what is it, 12:30 at night?
Something like that,
I'm 40
probably.
years
Yeah.
old, man. I can't stay up this late, but I was doing it. I'm to the point where I wish I had a calculator in front of me. I like to roll. I like to open roll. And that seems like such a cool thing until you realize that everyone can see what's been rolled and everyone is like looking at you to perform addition and subtraction in front of them. I might have to put up a GM screen, you know, just so I can kind of give myself a little bit of estimation room. But anyway, I'm very tired is what I'm trying to tell you. And then I look up to my right and an audio file is playing. And I'll tell you my first mistake from that night was facing away from the large screen in the back to watch the bars fill up. For those of you at home, these specials, and Alex, please talk over me if I'm explaining this wrong. But it's sort of like every time a group reports a successful encounter, that's like another success that's needed to move the plot onto the next stage. Everything. So I'm kind of up there looking, and I see you up, you know, at the big table, like
on my stage. Yes.
table. Yeah, up on the stage. It's a stage. Yeah, with the table. I see you up there, and you're looking at someone else. And the audio file is playing where some NPC is like getting killed or something. And you go, that's me. I was like, I think that's him. That's staying the voice. So how does something like that come about? Would they just like, here, do this? Or like, what's the deal?
Well, so there's two answers to that. The first answer is that I'm sort of the one who puts together those presentations because they are specials. So that's the one place where I use my old video production degree, right? My media production degree is I get various people in the community to record these voices and then send them in, and I chop them up and then send them off to our tech team who makes this beautiful presentation. Yeah. If you haven't been to an interactive special recently, like, please go just to check this out. It looks fantastic. So in general, that's just sort of one of my projects that I have made one of my projects. With this particular individual, as you allude to, there's this one character who has one line. He is an elf supremacist, and he gets sort of betrayed and murdered by a demon, as one does.
That should be what happens to an elf supremacist.
That's absolutely what should happen to an elf supremacist. And the reason that I voiced this little twerp is because as I was editing it, I realized I never got anyone to do the voice because he had one line and I missed it until the very end as I'm putting these together. And I'm like, well, it's one line. I'll do it. That's fine. I used to do all of the narration and everything because I was just like, it's easier. Sure. And then eventually I was like, no one wants to listen to my voice this long. So I recorded the one line of the elf supremacist. I think the line, hang on, I think I can do the line. It sounds like, Sarah left, no, you need me. And then he gets murdered. Wow. And it's great. And that line has followed me ever since because people think it's very funny to play at me, which, to be fair, it is very funny.
It is. Yeah. I mean, so that's just so funny because I just like looked back. I was just kind of looking around and I was like, I think you just told some person that he's the guy. So I was like, I'm pretty sure that this is Alex Speidel, who I'm about to talk to. It's funny that it is. So it's just such a small world when it comes to stuff, which is another reason why I love the community so much. I'd like to switch gears here and visit with you about United Paizo Workers, which is the union that was voluntarily recognized by Paizo's management in 2021. Now,
yes, indeed, my other organized play work.
Yeah, it's like a different kind of organized play. Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
Yes.
Now, I don't know if I'm going to get the credit for this or not. Maybe this, but I call the union UpDub. Is that something you've heard before? Can I have the?
No, you can have that one.
I'll take that one. Note the time and the place whenever this goes on. I go, Donnie, I'm going to call it UpDub. I wonder if someone else has done that. Sounds like no one else has.
Not to my knowledge, no.
And now what we're doing is we're coinciding with my own background. I happen to be a labor attorney, and I work a lot with fire and police unions. So it's not the Fraternal Order of Police; it's FOP when I'm thinking about them. And so I go, oh, what's the FOP done? And that's sort of a bit of my life. So that's where we get UpDub. But when I was reading the news about that, I was struck by the voluntary recognition. Yeah. My suspicion is with you serving today as one of the union stewards that maybe you were kind of around for that as well.
Oh, absolutely.
Can you, whatever you're comfortable talking about, can you take us through who was there a moment in a room where that happened? Was that an email that hit your inbox? What was that like?
Yeah, it was. We were really surprised that happened. For those of you who, I guess, maybe aren't as versed in labor law as those of us in this conversation, typically when a workplace forms a union, they go to their management, their bosses, and they say, hello, we would like you to recognize us as a union. And pretty much...
Here, and why don't I play the part of management at this point?
Okay, great. So you can be management. Hello, management. We have all signed union cards, a supermajority of us. We would like you to recognize us as a union, please.
These cards mean nothing to me. Please go back to work.
Yeah, right. That's pretty much how it usually works,
right? That's the typical, right?
Yeah,
and by the way, if I'm management at that point, I'm going to a boutique law firm that specializes in legal ways to prevent unionization.
Legal, sure.
Right, yeah. The air quotes are implied, yeah. Now, that's typical. And by the way, I'm talking more about private sector. I work in the public sector where negotiations are a lot more common and everything, especially police and fire. But back to you. So there's voluntary recognition, which is really abnormal.
Yeah. And, usually, again, what happens when management says, no, go back to work. Also, I'm calling Littler Mendelsohn, is that you then file with the National Labor Relations Board, the NLRB, to have a union election. So in about 2 or 3 months, you will get to vote on whether or not to have a union.
Yeah.
And usually that's what happens. And usually, but not always, the workers will win this. It depends on how hard they manage to union bust you.
Yeah.
But other than, as you say, maybe public sector employees or nonprofits, a lot of the time will voluntarily recognize, because often nonprofits want to keep a good image. Union busting is not necessarily in line with the values they're raising money for.
It's a bad look.
That sort of thing. Right. It's a bad look for, I'll choose an example at random here, the Trevor Project to union bust their employees. So I wish they'd stop. But usually in the for-profit sector, you'll have a union election. And so to be voluntarily recognized like this really was historic for Paizo leadership to do this. It's not totally unprecedented, but as I say, extremely uncommon. And as far as when that happened, quite honestly, I think it was an email that hit our inboxes, or maybe a call from our organizers at the CWA that said they're willing to do voluntary recognition. There's a couple of things that you need to do, without getting too into it. There was someone that we thought was included in the unit that actually was about to be a manager. So they said, well, you can't include this person. And we said, well, if that's the cost of it and this person is a manager anyway, sure. Yeah. We'll take that trade. Absolutely.
Sure.
We were a little taken aback. We didn't start contract negotiations, which is the next step after you're recognized as a union, for several months after that, because quite frankly, we hadn't prepared to be recognized that fast. We had prepared for a couple of months of lawyers coming in and trying to talk us out of it before we voted and won. So we weren't prepared to sit down the next day and start negotiating a contract.
You got to feel like you were steeling yourself for kind of a fight. And then they were like, okay. And you were like, oh. oh, okay. I mean, taken
yeah.
aback almost, right?
Yeah, and again, that's not like a slight against Paizo leadership or anything that we expected them to be monstrous. It's just that's what happens when you form a union. You go to management, you say, please recognize us. They say no. Like, that's just what we expected to happen. Yeah. We didn't know how hard they would fight, but we always just assumed, like, we're going to have to vote on this and that's fine. But for them to voluntarily recognize us, I think, was really a surprise and was really a credit to the community support that we had. And I want to specifically say to the freelancers that at the time were really pushing hard against management to sort of clean up their act, fix some issues that had come to light, and who basically said, if you recognize the workers, we will kind of, go back to work and start turning in work and let up on you. And I think that really turned the tide for us, just that incredible outpouring of support. We owe so much to them and to the whole community for just really supporting us wholeheartedly and full-throatedly, because it was about a week from the time that we went public with the union to them voluntarily recognizing us. And I think that was mostly just for them to talk to lawyers and figure out what to do, which is understandable. Brand new territory for them.
Yeah.
But it was very eerie to have just a week of no communication at all. We didn't know what they were planning. We didn't know what was going on before they reached out to our people.
Yeah. Well, I think
so. It's a little spooky.
I think your assumption on that is totally correct. As someone that will advise management in this context, I'll bet you there were a lot of conversations about, oh man, what does this mean? What is this? What's the long term of this? And I will admit that the cynic in me did wonder if, I don't want to get into it, but I recall there being at least some, I would say lowercase c controversy going on with Paizo. I wasn't, it wasn't something that I thought was going to, change the course of the company forever, but it was something that I followed as a fan.
Absolutely.
And the cynic in me wondered, okay, was there maybe a knee jerk or a trade or a calculation that happened on the part of management to say, let's go ahead and serve up a good story for people. Yeah. I think it's so interesting that you mentioned that not being prepared to negotiate the contract. I totally feel you on that. This is one aspect of what I do for a living. And I can tell you that at least in the public sector, it takes tremendous preparation to stake out positions, to stake out priorities, to do an in-depth read of the current CBA. You didn't even have a contract. So there must have been an in-depth analysis of what the status quo was or what past practice was to at least create some kind of baseline to negotiate against. Is that accurate?
Yeah, it was a lot of thinking about how the workplace was, a lot of thinking about what we wanted it to be as well. As you say, we fundamentally wrote our contract from scratch. There's not another tabletop RPG publisher with a contract. There's only a handful of game-related unions at all at the time we negotiated. There's more now, which is great. But we were sort of scraping bits and pieces. I spent a lot of time looking at the flight attendants union contract.
Cool.
Interesting. Not necessarily because there was a lot of commonality, although they are also a CWA union. The AFA CWA is one of our sister unions. But just because I thought it was well written, I thought there was a lot of language we could borrow from it. Quite frankly, it was in a PDF I could copy and paste text from, and that's not always the case. So that was very helpful. But even then, there were certain things that when I'm looking at things like, what does our contract need to cover around conventions and travel and things like that? Well, the flight attendants work a pretty irregular schedule. They have pretty strange working hours and things like that. How do they handle this sort of thing? What can I learn from this that we can take back? So it was a lot of taking bits and pieces, learning piecemeal, writing a lot of stuff from scratch, and just trying to find the best parts of what was out there. And hopefully as more and more of these companies, these game companies form unions, we can pass on our contract to them and say, good news, you don't have to do this from scratch. We have a lot of this here. We have stuff in here about overtime and about crunch and things like that you can borrow from if you want, and hopefully even improve on.
That's a really novel idea, as a game company building something that others can build upon. To benefit the whole. That's a really novel concept that Paizo essentially.
I know, right? That's a nice idea, isn't it? It's just spiffy.
And I come at this from the standpoint, what you just described is something called pattern bargaining. And pattern bargaining is when, one union's achieved it. Now it's a precedent. Now we're going to follow the same pattern into other CBAs. And we see that a lot in the public sector between like the firefighters and the police officers. And our calculation is like, well, if we give it to the firefighters, police officers are coming for it next, and it's the way, that's how these things work,
Yeah. I mean, there were definitely a lot of times at the table, and I can't talk too much about what happened at the table, of course, but there were a lot of times at the table when a proposal would be met with, well, we've never had this, or no one's ever had this before. And it's like, that's true.
That's true.
We've never had a union either. It's a brave new world.
Yeah.
Let's chart some new territory, And I think, I look at these newer unions and I see that they're staking out even more territory than we did. The ZeniMax workers, video game workers in Bethesda, made a big splash a few months ago that they got agreement on protections against generative AI in their work, which is huge and not even something we were thinking about a few years ago when we were negotiating. So,
we'll see that in the public sector, using AI to monitor employees, for example, is like something that I think unions really want to get out ahead of. Mm-hmm. And it is, I think you're totally right. I think that the issues like that are going to reshape workforces, and you're smart to say, no, we think really the bargaining unit members ought to be producing the content as opposed to, computer systems and stuff like that.
Yeah. And, we're certainly in a really lucky place on that particular front, where management is very much against it as well. They've said so much publicly. So we don't have a lot of fear in our hearts that like, oh, before the next contract, they might try to do something. But I definitely think, our contract's up in 2026. We're probably going to start negotiating in, 12 months, 18 months. I think that'll definitely be one of the things we want in there, just like codifying what's already been said publicly is, that sort of thing. And who knows what new technology, what new changes in the workforce will happen in the next year, What
were some of the specific victories that you look back to on what you obtained? I mean, you discussed protection surrounding crunch, things like that. Was that the extent of it, or are there other things?
No. I think one of the things that I always like to highlight to people is that there's a lot of really boring stuff in the contract that you don't necessarily think about as a win. That really is, because it's a change from status quo. Management has to come to us and bargain with us anytime they want to change anything about our working conditions. And it really does mean anything. If they want to change from paying us every other week to paying us twice a month, they have to come to talk to us about it, because that might affect how someone's stuff is set up. And a lot of those conversations are pretty simple. It's just, we want to do this. Yeah, that seems fine. No one's raised a flag about it. Great, we'll do that. Right. But of course, there's that in the contract just as a baseline, right? Any unionized worker is going to have that if their contract is worth anything at all. But beyond that, I think there's a lot of things that I really like about it. I was just talking to a new union member this week who just joined us, and they were really excited that we don't have sick leave, we have sick and safe leave. So first of all, your sick leave can be used for you or your chosen family or pets. So if you need to go take care of your kid, that's sick leave. If you need to take your cat to the vet, that's sick leave. If you have chosen family and it's really up to you what that means, you can use the sick leave for that if they have medical issues. It's also safe leave. So heaven forbid, if you're dealing with any sort of domestic violence, any situation like that where you need to go talk to lawyers, you need to go to court about something like that, you can use that leave for that as well, which is, not sexy and fun all of the time, but it's really important when you need it. Absolutely.
Yeah.
There's protections in there that protect us from layoffs, make layoffs, I don't want to say impossible. No union can unfortunately totally prevent layoffs, but it makes them difficult, and I will say onerous for management. Also, if they execute a layoff and then they decide that they actually need someone to do that job later, we have recall rights for 18 months. So if they were to lay off our customer service team and then go, oh no, we need a customer service team, actually, they have to call those people back first if that's within 18 months because they realize that they actually need that job. Whoops-a-daisies.
Yeah, sure.
Or, heaven forbid, if it was a financial issue where they had to let people go, but then the finances got back on track, those people would have first crack at getting their jobs back. And I know that's a huge issue in the games industry these days is layoffs. There's severance in there for everyone. There's recall rights. There's a lot of protections for people. There are 2 places in the contract where an issue is determined by a roll of a D20.
I saw that. I was good. Yes, I love that.
Neither of them are fun issues necessarily. But there are a couple places where in a contract it's like, if there's no other way to determine this exactly roughly identical thing.
Yeah.
Most contracts would say flip a coin. We said we're a game company. Can we roll a D20 about it?
I was like, I got to get the D20 in to the stuff I do.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Because we coin flip. And, I've coin flipped over the phone with guys. I'm like, I promise I won. I did. I promise I did. Was there a vibe from management in that? Was there a position at least at the outset, if you want to get something, you have to give something? Did they seek concessions on their end in exchange for some of the rights that you were asking for?
Going to answer that in kind of a roundabout way.
Yeah.
When you're at the bargaining table, it is a negotiation, right? It is both sides are giving and taking. One side would come to the table with a proposal about whatever it is, and they would say, we think that this particular aspect should look like this. The other side would volley it back and say, that's interesting. How about this version? And eventually you arrive somewhere in the middle. Near the end, you do kind of tend to do a lot of horse trading. Okay, we wanted 30 days of sick leave. This is a hypothetical. This wasn't something we really negotiated, but we wanted 30 days of sick leave. We'll cut it back to 12 in return for you give us higher salaries, something like that.
Yeah.
You sort of do that near the end. I will say that another thing that I've said to any new union member who joins us is that I think that we have about as cordial a relationship with management as a union can possibly have with their management. There is an inherent antagonism, an inherent friction there, an inherent we're watching you to ensure you don't slip up.
I've heard it described as a divorce that never ends. It's sort of like
that's an interesting way of looking at it. You're not wrong. But all of our disputes have really ended pretty cordially. We haven't gone 12 rounds with them in a court. We haven't had to file a ton of grievances or things like that about them when there have been issues. And of course there have been issues over the past couple of years, because there always are in any workplace. We've been able to resolve them pretty amicably, and so I think that's a credit to people on both sides of the table.
Sure.
We're not looking to bring them to the mat over every tiny issue. We're willing to talk to them like humans when maybe technically the contract says we should wrap them across the knuckles for this, but we're going to go have a talk with them and be like, hey, can we do this better next time?
Yeah.
And vice versa. They have treated us with respect the whole time. They're not looking to demonize the union, to demonize the stewards or the people who are sitting at the bargaining table. It's all very cordial when UPW has a success, like when we're nominated for an incredible industry award, they celebrate that success. We have managers tell us how glad they are that the union exists. Like, it's as cordial as I think it can possibly get in a workplace. And I really appreciate that, because not every unionized workplace is like that. Some of them are battles tooth and nail every single day.
Yeah. I mean, I can attest that it can get hard. It can get hard. And I've been privy to, and I've heard about events that can destroy a relationship between management and the union for like 5 years. And 5 years seems to be about the period of time it takes to bring it back. But not only that, I've heard of events that can even where union leadership and union membership are not aligned on a concept where, leadership is playing the long game and membership is like, but come on, what are we doing about this thing that's happening tomorrow? Things like that.
It's great if my salary will be so much better in 5 years, but I can't pay my rent now.
I need to pay my rent now. Yeah. Or it's like, or take a disciplinary matter, for example, like membership will be like, but this discipline, what this member did was wrong. But the leadership is going, well, now wait a minute. But management went about this the wrong way. It doesn't matter. The details just don't matter. It's about the precedent, and that can get very fraught, in my line of work. And I think that, it can happen anywhere. You mentioned, management's support for the union upon achievements. I suspect you're referring to this Diana Jones Award nomination. Yes. I mean, and I will admit I was ignorant of this but then Donnie, you said it's considered what?
I saw it referred to as the Nobel Peace Prize or the Nobel Prize of the gaming industry.
Yes,
which
the Nobel Prize of
seems
the gaming industry.
Now,
yes,
yeah,
that's the best of the prizes that you can get.
It is. Yeah,
it's a pretty good prize.
What is the Diana Jones Award? How did this nomination come about? Was this something you applied for? And then how's the competition looking?
Boy, I wish I had answers to some of those questions. So the Diana Jones Award, for those who aren't familiar, the full name is the Diana Jones Award for Excellence in Gaming. And as you say, the best comparison is kind of the Nobel Prize. It's not quite like a best picture or best game or something like that. It's excellence in gaming. It's who is making something new and different within the gaming industry. Past winners, some games have won. Ticket to Ride won for being like a quintessential immediate classic game that brought a ton of people into gaming, myself included, to be quite frank. A lot of activists and groups and individuals have won this sort of award. In 2020, the winner of the Diana Jones Award was actual play, just the concept of actual play.
Oh, well, that's us.
So congratulations,
wow,
you're a Diana Jones winner.
We did it. Yay!
You did it. It's just really who's making gaming better. And this is an award that's determined by a partially secret committee. It's not something you apply for. It's not something that you stick your hand up and say, I would like one of those, please. That's for me. There's a committee that puts forth nominations and discusses them and decides on finalists. One of the finalists this year is the United Paizo Workers. And I would be remiss if I did not point out that one of my coworkers, Rue Dickey, is also a finalist for their own separate charity work. Oh. So Rue has a 40% chance of winning the Diana Jones Award this year. Wow. It's incredible. That's fantastic. It's incredible.
Yeah, we were looking at the nominees, and we do sometimes feel like we're off on an island, but we were looking at this together before we talked to you tonight, and we were like, wow, we haven't heard of some of this stuff. We got to learn about this stuff. But maybe that's a function of the award itself, is to uplift maybe some niche stuff that maybe needs more attention.
Yeah, I know there's like an event or two that are nominated this year. I think Adepticon is nominated, and I think there's a European convention that's nominated.
Oh, yeah.
I'm not familiar with either. I know Adepticon a little bit, but I don't know these events at all. But it's inspired me to like look into what makes them the best of the best. What about this Finnish role playing or whatever it is like is new and different, and that excites me. There's a game designer, Amy Bayo, I hope I'm pronouncing her name incorrectly, and I'm so sorry if it's not correct, who makes these games that sound delightful. I have friends who say, oh, I'm absolutely buying all of her games at Gen Con. So I think it's just really a way to highlight the people and the groups that are really improving and pushing the industry forward. And when I say that I never imagined my name would be in contention for it, you say that about awards sometimes, but like as kids, you fantasize about like, oh, what if I won a Best Picture? What if I won a Grammy? Like you practice awards.
I wanted to be like Billy Joel when I was.
Yeah.
I was like, I thought that was a possibility. It's not, but
as someone who has a degree in television, I'm like, gosh, I'd love to win an Emmy someday for something, right? That'd be great. You think about that. When I say I never imagined it, it was like it never even crossed my mind. The sort of work I do is so far from what I thought would be recognized, and so to just be receiving an invitation to this ceremony at Gen Con is truly wild to me, and I think a lot of my fellow union members as well. It's an incredible honor, and I just don't know what to do with it.
Yeah, congratulations on it's amazing, and I think it's good for what you're specifically doing with you and your colleagues, but good for Paizo too, I have to say. I think. I am not on the decision-making panel for this.
Well, then what's the point of doing this? I have to go right now.
I just need you to understand. I don't have, but if I were, I would be like, give it to UpDub. I would say that you should give it to the UpDub.
Absolutely. Yeah. And the other thing I just want to say about it is that I think it's very validating. I think a concern I've worked on a lot of union campaigns at this point, which is a wild thing to say, but I've communicated with probably organizers of at least a dozen different campaigns, if not more, over the past few years. And I know that one of the things that concerns a lot of people, especially people who are really, really active or really involved organizers, is that they worry that they're going to get put on a list somewhere of don't hire this person because they did a union, and we don't want that at our workplace. Yeah. And so to just have this group of industry luminaries and professionals recognize us, I think, is really a signal to other people in the industry as well, that this is not a thing to be shamed or feared, both from like, as an organizer, you shouldn't be afraid to do this, but also as management, you shouldn't be afraid to have a union in your workplace. It is not destructive. It is not a problem. It is not the beginning of ruination for your company. And so I think that more than anything is what really means a lot to me, just to have that validation of my colleagues and other professionals in the industry just say, this is a good thing actually and should be recognized, just means so much.
Yeah. From my standpoint, and I do come at this from the other side, but I have seen the value in my work area of a harmonization between the priorities of the workers and management. And I think that I'm with you, is I think what I'm trying to say in a roundabout way.
One of the things that I think we said a lot during our unionization campaign, but also especially when we went public, is we like our jobs. We love the games that we make. We don't want to not make these games. We don't want to not work for Paizo. We just want our working conditions to reflect our passion and the kind of company that Paizo wants to be. Unionizing wasn't an antagonistic thing, and I think a lot of workplaces look at it that way, like management has done something wrong and is now punished with a union, or it's a direct act against them like that, when really it's not. It's just us saying we love what we do, we want to keep doing it, and we can't do it under the conditions we have, so we'd like to work with you to make them better.
Well, not only that, but have a seat at the table, when big decisions are being made.
Absolutely.
And that leads into something I wanted to ask you about. So we're going to go back to 2023. We're going to talk about the OGL snafu a little bit. Paizo undertakes the remaster project after achieving record sales that was backlash against, Wizards. Now I want to understand, Paizo undertakes this new project. Deadlines must have been moved.
Absolutely.
Projects delayed, moved around. What was the engagement with the workers like when this company changes course on a dime like that?
I think, again, we were in a very lucky place where we didn't have to explain to management what was going on and why it was a problem, in terms of when the news first came out. Management, Eric Mona in particular, right there on the front lines, spit and fire.
Yeah.
A lot of the people who run Paizo, without getting too much into mudslinging within the industry, a lot of the people who work at Paizo and who lead Paizo have been burned by the dragon before. And so knew what it felt like. And I don't want to say weren't surprised, because I think we were all pretty surprised by what happened, but understood why it happened. And maybe we're a little better prepared than I was, as an example. This was my first real exposure to this sort of behavior. I wasn't around for the GSL. I wasn't around for previous hiccups. So this was sort of my first exposure to a real seismic shift like that. And as far as engagement with the workers, I mean, we were all on the same page that something had to be done. I was not necessarily in all of the meetings when it was decided we needed to do the remaster, so I don't know who exactly was leading the charge there, but ultimately, I think management in particular did a really good job of sort of getting us all on the same page of this is what needs to happen. And as the union, we were just able to step in and make sure, okay, we understand this needs to happen, but let's make sure that, like you say, those deadlines do shift, that we're not trying to keep to the already aggressive schedule we had for 2023 on top of doing all of this extra work. And, management understood that. They weren't about to try and double the workload and expect us to do that without exploding. But it's just always nice to have that check in play that, like, if something did become an issue, we could step in and say, hey, this is not tenable. This is not actually workable. We're going to need to do something else.
With an outside perspective, with at least some frame of reference on this, I was curious. I was like, how did that go? It sounds like it was pretty harmonious.
It really wasn't. Like I say, we were all on the same page that something needed to happen, that changes, needed to happen. And ultimately, I'm sure there were a lot of different solutions thrown out behind various closed doors of, do we do a remaster here? Do we proceed as normal? I'm sure at some point someone raised the specter of, do we just go to 3rd edition now? I'm really glad we didn't do that. Oh boy, that would have been a nightmare. But yeah, and I think also with Paizo being as small a company as it is relatively, it's much easier for, as you say, a rank and file member to express really to Eric Mona, to Jim Butler, to the people at the top of the company, because you're only 1 or 2 layers removed from them to say, here's what we need in order to do this. So yeah, we were able to ultimately get on the same page. We knew it would be a lot of work. We knew it wouldn't be easy. I don't think any of us ventured into it without a full understanding of this is going to be a lot. But like I say, we didn't form a union because we didn't like our jobs. We love what we do, and we understood what we needed to do, and we were just going to do it as best we could. And here we are now, a year and a half later. I can't believe it, but Remaster's just about finished at this point.
Yeah.
And then we get to go on to some new and exciting stuff that's been on the burner for quite some time.
Yeah, I just think that's so cool. I will refrain from asking you about, what these things get announced when they get announced and stuff. But I'm totally, I don't know, Donnie, if you feel this, I'm jazzed to be just talking to someone that's like involved in this stuff. It's just so cool.
Yeah, it's really exciting, and it's to think about how just all of that lines up and works together. I work at an operations side of the business, and we actually do we have a publishing side, and so some of the challenges and things. So just hearing how all that works together is really interesting.
And it's so funny because I probably can't talk specifics because I might even be wrong about these things, but I still think we have stuff that has not yet released that like was supposed to be released. I don't know, a year and a half ago that. Just the earthquake shifted and and like we are finally approaching the end. But like I say, I think there's still things that like we're not actually out of the woods yet. This was supposed to be out a year ago, and it's going to come out when it comes out.
One thing that I think it shows, and I think you kind of spoke to it with the organization size, but being agile and nimble and being able to pivot like that and coordinate all that. Not a lot of companies can do that type of thing. So that was a really impressive feat. To pull that off as well as was done.
Yeah, I mean, Paizo's history is littered with having to turn on a dime and having to pivot and having to make changes, mostly due to outside forces. Never, we suddenly decide we want to do a new edition or something. It's, oh no, the forces outside have forced us to do these things. And so I think it's very interesting. It's a very interesting mindset, especially among the people who have been here for all or most of its history of like, well, here we go again. We've done this twice before. And then those of us who are new saying, well, I guess I'll just strap in and I'll go for a ride. But you're right that it is unique among this company. I don't know that there are many others that could really do what we do or
having
should.
Resilience be a core part of a company's DNA is, that should give security to folks who work there, right? You can weather storms, and you've kind of shown that multiple times. So again, impressive.
Absolutely. I mean, you say resilience, I say spite, potato, either way.
I think both are, I as a fellow spite motivated person from time to time, I can tell you it's powerful too. It's very powerful.
It certainly can be, yes.
Alex, I want to end with asking you about the trip to Washington D.C. I was up on I'm going to drop it one more time just because I'm the type of person that wants to make a thing. I was on the UpDub website and there was I'm sure a lot of people have read this. I mean, you went to the White House, you met
I sure did.
a sitting president in the Oval Office to talk about what I assume to be, a new proliferation in unionization. How did that opportunity come to you? Who was like, let's send Alex, and what was that visit like?
Oh my God. It was incredible. And it was the wildest week of my life, I think. I don't know if I can say that at this point. I've had a lot of wild weeks, but it's up there for sure. I was invited as CWA, the Communication Workers of America, is our parent union. We're organized under them because, quite frankly, labor lawyers like you are expensive, and we can't afford that, but the CWA can.
So there's a pooling of resources that maybe
there's
happens
a pooling
there.
of resources.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Gotcha. Pooling of resources, pooling of experience. They've been tremendously helpful. Going it alone would have been a whole nother adventure. Yeah. The CWA was invited to send a representative to a meeting with the Vice President Harris at the time, and the current Secretary of Labor, Marty Walsh, to just meet with them and talk with them about the state of labor organizing and unions in 2020, May of 2022, and sort of the struggles that they faced and what they could do from their high vantage point to make it easier for workers like us to organize. And for some reason, I have some excellent advocates for myself within CWA. We have a very talented organizer that we worked with named Ted Hooker. He's fantastic. Really taught me everything I know about this, and I mean that very sincerely. And he'll say the same thing about me, actually. But he was in that conversation, and he said, well, we've got this new union over at Paizo, and I know just the guy we could send.
That's cool.
And I want to be clear, I tried to fob it off on a couple other union members first. I was very honored, but I said, surely there's someone more qualified than me. And I talked to another couple other people, and they said, I can't do this. I think you should do it. And so finally I took it on. And it was about a week before the meeting that they called me and said, we'd like you to do this. So it was a week of, here's a secret service form you have to fill out with all of your personal details so that they can background check you and make sure you're as normal as we can get.
Right.
Here's all these things you have to do. Here's your travel itinerary. But I got to, as I say, participate in that meeting. I got to meet with some great other organizers and activists. Most notably, Christian Small is one of the leaders of the Amazon Labor Union. But also I met with organizers from the Starbucks Union, REI organizers, someone from Titmouse Animation, who I believe did the Legend of Vox Machina cartoon, among others. So there's a game connection there. Cool. Represented from the Baltimore, I believe it was the Baltimore Libraries as well. So just, sort of who's who of each of the big unions kind of getting to send someone to talk to them. And then, as you mentioned, about partway through the meeting, President Biden decides to walk in and crash the meeting.
Yeah, it's like, you were in his office, were you, or were you?
Well, we were in the Roosevelt room next door, which, by the way, doesn't actually look like it does on the West Wing. I learned this very quickly.
Donnie and I are both West Wing guys.
Me too. It's not got the glass walls around it. You cannot see it. Sorry, it's actually kind of it's just got a boring gray paint. It's kind of sad.
The White House is a letdown, it sounds like.
I know, it's so disappointing. I would never go back.
So the president comes into the room.
The president walks into the room, I want to be clear, from a door directly behind me, which I did not know led to the Oval Office until it opened and he walked in. Nice. My brain short circuits. Wow. I have just enough time to stand up and shake his hand and introduce myself. And then he sits 2 chairs over from me and joins us for a little while Christian Smalls tells him about the issues that the Amazon Labor Union is facing.
My goodness.
That's amazing.
And then he says, would you like to come over into the Oval Office for some photos? And we say, yes, Mr. President. Of course, we would very much like that.
If the president invites you into the Oval Office to take a photo, I mean, you got to do that. Yeah. You just have to.
In pretty much any instance, I would probably say yes. I can think of a couple where I wouldn't. But yeah, if the president invites you into the Oval Office, you should probably
go in there. It's safe. It's safe.
It's probably one of the safest places on Earth. Yes.
Well, it has been a pleasure to sit down and talk to you today. Thank you again for your time.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. I hope your listeners have enjoyed and they didn't turn it off 10 minutes in after they heard my voice. And if you stuck around to the end, I'll tell you the secret next book we're releasing. Oh my God. That's not true. I can't do that. I don't have that authority.
I was like, Donnie, I think something special is about to happen. It's not happening. Well,
I don't have that authority. But if I had led with that, then people might have stuck around the whole time.
We'll take that. We'll move that to the front.
Just clip that to the front.
Then we'll reveal the lie at the back.
Perfect.
Well, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for your time. Best of luck with everything. And we appreciated you coming on and talking to us today. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Alex. Great meeting you.
Yeah, hope to see you all and hope to see some of your listeners at Gen Con as well. Come say hi.
All right. Well, take care.
Take care, sir.
Take care.